we have Laura Lam. Laura Lam is from Toronto, and she's really a specialist in migrant workers. As you all know, Canada is key for many people around the world who go to Canada to live there. Actually, it's the same for Laura. She came from Hong Kong, and now she's first in Vancouver and now in Toronto. We would like to invite you, Laura, to do your keynote speech. And meanwhile, anyone who would like to ask her questions, do so in the chat box. Laura, welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Today, thank you so much for having me. I'm speaking to you from Toronto, Canada, where Toronto is in the District 1 Spoon Territory, a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississauga, and Haudenosaunee people, and on whose land I am privileged to live as an immigrant and to work and play on. So thank you for the team, to the Wage Indicator team, to allowing me to critically reflect and speak on this topic of migration and platforms, which has been very important to me and the people that I know. And I also thank the connections that have been able to spread the word about the research to help me connect with the participants who were so grateful and generous to share their stories. And it's a privilege to get to share some of their voices into the world. So just to give some context, I started my research with Dr. Anna Diffilidoof out of the Canada Excellence Research Chair in Migration and Integration in 2020. And we published a work in this earlier this summer titled An Unlikely Stepping Stone, where we really explored how platform work has shaped the newcomer migrant integration. And we specifically studied the person-to-person offline physical places of platform interactions. Today, I don't want to discuss directly the paper. I'm happy to talk more about it, but I think what I want to share is actually some of the questions, the prevailing questions that have nagged at me, and perhaps some of the hopes I see in terms of how we can talk about migration and migrant workers and the platform in the platform world. My motivation was rooted in my work as a researcher on migration specifically, but especially the labor market integration of migrants in Canada. I kept on encountering migrants who were in the community who expressed to me they had a desire to find meaningful work, but they are constantly find themselves on platform work. And these are not necessarily new migrants. These are migrants of various ranges of experience. And my research took me down paths of wanting to understand who and why one would decide to enter into such forms of precarious and non-standard platform work. Myself, I had implicit ideas of who were the migrants engaged in this work, as we all might have from our own context. But after spending hours in research with migrants engaged in this work, I think there are examples that stood out to me, such as the pharmacist from Egypt who was awaiting his pharmacy degree to be credentialed in Toronto. And he was telling me that, platform work is used to complement his income. And it was a story to me of how newcomers are using various combinations of work in handling a really difficult transition in their lives. But at the same time, I've encountered a musician from India who told me that platform work was on the side while he pursued a culinary degree. And it came into Canada, allowed him the new freedom to pursue his dreams. And it really taught him that the settlement experience can be economic freedom in some ways, and it could be a reset. All to say there's some really huge range of experiences and motivations, yet some of the themes of precarity still exist and it lingers. And I want to preface that maybe not all gig work is precarious, but it's important to differentiate how precarity is experienced. And even understanding not all migrants interact the same way with gig work. And it is easy for policymakers and researchers to make generalizations that all migrants experience platform work in the same way. But in reality, the question to whether it's a stepping stone or a trap is very nuanced, even in my current research. And I'm still trying to uncover the question. And this question is a Pandora's box. One of the most central themes of how such forms of non-standard precarious work has existed in Canada, especially, is how it is a symptom of our labor market. And we cannot have a conversation about solutions without first addressing some of the causes of why people choose to enter into these working conditions. And it's not removing agency, because I think it's very important for me to stress that the migrants I've spoken to, they're not a maiden defeat. They're not saying there is agency in the ways migrants work around their situations. So that's very important for me. but also challenging what are the systemic barriers in mobility and movement that has questioned why some might enter, and it also had made me wonder why some might get out and what has enabled them to do so, but who ends up staying inside platform work and then becomes a trap. To start off, I also need to give some context to my research setting. The entry of migrants into platform work in Canada comes at the interaction between the structural barriers that migrants face with Canada's immigration regime and also the deregulation of the workplace, such as the rise of non-standard work and independent contractor agreements, for example. Canada attracts its immigrants using a point system. It's a merit-based point system since the 1960s, where it has favored individuals with high capital and high financial and high human capital. And despite having similar skills and education attainment levels comparing to native-born Canadians, migrants are more likely to be employed in low-wage, entry-level jobs or middle-level jobs, involuntary work arrangements as well. And Canada accepts its permanent residents through three main avenues, which is economic, family, and refugee and asylum class. And also there are non-permanent residents, such as those on a temporary basis stay in Canada, who they have work permits or study permits. Most of my research participants were recruited from Canada's urban centers around the Greater Toronto area, which consists of 35% of total immigrants in Canada, as well as Metro Vancouver, consisting of around 13% of all immigrants. And these were specifically chosen because they were big metropolitan areas of research and of migrants, and where they can attract a lot of powerhouses in terms of service sectors, and also as they boast a strong settlement and post-secondary education sector, and which on paper should support migrants in their transition into a new home. And I have to preface all of this because, not surprisingly, geographies do matter. And I know we have an international audience here, but I think this is still an applicable concept to understand how migrants come in with a set of expectations for a better life, and they hope to use their skills and talents to contribute back to the economy and to their new home. Yet they're consistently running up against barriers. And it's important for understand these contexts in all our cities that we live in. And one of the key points I hope you gather from above when I was explaining a little bit about the immigration regime is the stress on human capital and education, for example. Going back to why this is a symptom of a bigger issue is precisely this point. The entry of migrants into platform work really challenges the predominant notions of an immigration system that an accumulation of human capital equates to success. And one of the participants that I've spoken to is a 50-year-old specialist from Syria, and this is what he told me. I knew nobody will take me on as a senior staff because first, I don't have the Canadian experience yet. So I said, okay, no problem. Let me just put my feet in the business, in the work, then I will improve myself. Also, I thought that to get a better opportunity, I have to study in Canada. So I went to college, but there is no hope to get a new job or to be better. That story has stood with me. And when faced with barriers to gainful employment, migrants accept platform work as a transitory step. In comparison to other low-income employment opportunities, platform work might emerge as the best alternative. Yet the step is optimistically perceived as transitionary, without really evidence whether this or might not be eventually becomes a trap. From here onwards, I want to explore several themes that I pose as research questions, and then perhaps some policy implications that I hope to leave you with, and perhaps more questions about how migration and gig work and platform work can be applied in your own cities. The first question is this: who is moving in and out of platform work, and who is being recruited in to fill the demand? In my recent piece with my colleague Cam Fung, we explore that perhaps one of the challenges of designing policy in this space is the notion of categorical ambiguity, whereas gig workers all group together. Their experiences are thought to follow the same trajectory without an understanding of the unique journeys that accompany each on their own path. When I spoke to Ira, an economic class immigrant in her mid-20s with a degree in computer science from India, she says this: it seems easy. And the ads as well for Skip the Dishes or Uber Eats, they have really cool ads saying, yeah, you work your own hours, which is true. Everything is true, but it does not really show the real struggle. So while we find that migrants are drawn to the attractiveness factors that the video has kind of mentioned earlier, and they're not oblivious to the conditions of the work. Yet ethnic network recruitment has been used as a prime recruitment tool. A lot of participants have told me they see advertisements in their schools amongst international students that were recruited by relatives, immigrant communities. Yet when the reality doesn't match up with these glamorous promises, migrants are often left in the dark and struggling to see where this will end. So policy-wise, I think our metrics for measuring non-standard and platform work are reactive, in this context at least, and we don't take enough of a proactive stance on this. So when we really need to understand not just are you doing platform or gig work, but it's understanding what are the main ways that you are making money. And this is a topic that has been explored by other researchers as well. And in many parts of the world, including Canada, we have a really piecemeal version of data collection. We capture some through administrative data, we capture some through surveys. But when we think about the demand and supply of workers in this space, we know that oftentimes migrants, they are migrants, people who have difficulty accessing job opportunities, racialized individuals, women and youth that are in there. And I think greater proactive and longitudinal measurements are needed to capture and understand the situations, job attitudes, and predicaments that render individuals in the space and how perception versus reality matches up. Especially during the pandemic, I think the opaque nature of how information is gathered, used, and distributed by platforms to workers have been highly concerning. The second theme I want to talk about, a question, is how can we move platform work from being the best alternative? This is a narrative I heard constantly, and it makes me question, why might some view platform work as their only option? And how can we help those who want to leave the space to transition? At a talk a few months back, I was asked the question of, now that flexible and precarious work arrangements are more normal, should government seek to require employers and the companies to provide certain benefits or to increase the scope of the public social safety net? And I think this is a huge question, and I don't want to tackle it all today, but my response is I think it's both. We need companies who exploit workers to be held accountable, but we also could use government support and our city specifically to work with migrants on this. And I'm particularly hopeful about some solutions that can assist migrants transition out of platform work. So for example, having our governments invest in skills recognition versus purely credentialing or educational signaling, it could enable greater mobility for migrants who want to pursue other work opportunities. And also this ties into conversations of how other forms of social welfare, such as policies like targeted basic income, can help support and provide an alternative income source during times when choices are limited. So I know navigating through precarity and platform and for migrants work is an abyss, and there's really no panacea for all of this. But for today, I hope that there are several key takeaways and themes that I can leave you with, and I would love to have this discussion further. But today we talked really a lot about, in this future of work, quote unquote, can we envision a reality where precarity might not need to be the default expectations for migrants? And it is easy for policymakers to make generalizations that all migrants experience platform the same way, but they don't. And how are migrants entering new receiving or host countries recognized in their skills and credentialing? I think this is a conversation of unemployment and underemployment of many migrants in all parts of the world. And lastly, who is moving in and who's moving out of platform work, and who is being recruited in to fill the demand? I think these are all questions that could percolate in our minds a little bit more. And lastly, an issue that I think deserves continual attention is how can we better listen to migrant workers' voices? I think in the city that I live in, we're seeing the provincial government leading consultation on shaping the workforce post-pandemic, yet they lack crucial worker representation. They don't have a single worker's voice in there, and especially gig workers are getting fed up on this, and they've been treated very much as disposable during the pandemic, personally bearing the brunt of many health and safety risks. So I think when designing and modernizing our policies for migrant gig workers, or just gig workers as well, it is a really huge and momentous task, but it's more crucial than ever to do it well and accounting into the different experiences of those who choose to enter this work. And the pandemic has catalyzed enormous amounts of job loss, and the aftermath of our labor market, as we all know, has really huge implications for workers' long-term security. And this is like, don't design a policy without a situation. policymakers need migrant gig workers and organizations that they work with to work closely together. And at the forefront of any policy analysis and decisions, they need to have their voices heard. The migration experience is non-linear and is turbulent at times. And as a researcher, my goal is to understand and hopefully inform future policies on how finding economic integration in a new home and new community does not necessarily have to be precarious, and where there can be dignified and decent work for migrants. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to the discussion to come. And if any of you are interested in chatting more in detail about the paper or other topics, please do reach out. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. It was very good, very cool, very interesting. There is a quite interesting question for you, and I would say, please read it careful, answer where everybody else can see what you answer, of course. And then at the same time, we continue with the migrant workers topic together with Niels van Doorn.